Hey there, Jen here. Sammy and little girl are having peanut butter, so if you hear them being unmannerly, that's what you're hearing. I know you're looking at a black screen. Let me go ahead and share the screen with you and make sure it's coming up on my end too. All right, so we'll jump right into it as long as the screen comes up here in a second for me. Looks like you're seeing it there. Come on now. There we go. All right. So I wanted to read some of this book, some more of it, and I figured that I had promised that I would share more. Nobody really comments on my channel. I don't know what the deal is, but it looks like people watch, so I'm going to push forward. And we had already discussed jumping ahead to chapter 5. Now that's for a dual purpose. When you read books online, unless you get permission or what have you, or you're the audiobook company, you need to not read the whole book in full and or add your own commentary. So I do both. And yes, I looked it up before I ever started doing this, because that's just part of due diligence. Now, we're going to jump into chapter 5 here. This is called the Hopi Survival Kit. It's part of a series that we're doing, a part of a playlist that I'm creating, if you will. It's the Hopi Survival Kit, the prophecies, instructions, and warnings revealed by the... hold on. No, I can't remember the phone. Revealed by the last... Let's see. And it doesn't even say there either. It just has his name. Anyways, moving on. We'll go ahead. Now, the reason we're reading this is because, again, dual purpose, just a little background why we're doing this on this channel, is because we are in, obviously, a time of the changing of the guard, so to speak. We have a lot of people who have been in leadership roles for many years, stepping down, passing on, or some other nefarious thing has taken place. So we've had a lot of politicians, a lot of leaders, a lot of, at least in proxy form, who have kind of passed the baton down to another generation. Not only that, I don't necessarily believe in quote unquote climate change. We're told in scripture that this will happen. It seems to be, again, God does everything with a dual purpose too. He's very efficient that way. It seems to be cyclical for the planet, for the plane, whatever you want to call it. But it also seems to be cyclical within us. We go through these periods of cleansing after being, a debaucherous generation, excuse me. People genuinely just seem to have some type of awakening. And again, I don't want to be new age about that. But there are a lot of people understanding that we should be changing our ways and that the way we're headed is probably not best for us. So I like to focus on solutions. I think that's more productive in this time that we're in. Definitely more productive than gossiping and coveting each other and other channels. So I try not to do that either. So let's jump right in. Now, this is where we get into the meat of it. And I only read ahead a couple of paragraphs. Hello, the denial of Christ is over, says the Michigander. Sorry. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Yes, I would agree. There's definitely something happening, but it's on both sides. But we are at the end of an age, and so we will see, either the yin or the yang kind of, take over. So let's see what the elders and the people of wisdom of only, recent past generations have to say about this time and how we should be handling ourselves and walking this out. So this is chapter 5 of the Hopi Survival Kit, and this is Beauty Behind the Mask. It says, while it is spelled Maasaw, Masaw, Massau, Maasau apostrophe U, and other ways, each of these names for this awesome Hopi deity is pronounced the same. Ma, like the sound of a bleeding sheep makes, and so, like the noun for female pig, or sow, sorry. Ma, sow. Okay, I was right the other day. We've already seen that where Hopi history is concerned, Ma Sao, very close to Messiah, no, plays an extremely important role. As a helper spirit serving the Creator, his assigned task is to be the guardian of the earth. He lives on the earth, he watches over it. When I described him in The Amazing Story, you learn that his appearance was so gory that the Hopi who met him at Orabi thought it must be a mask, one like the typical Masao, mask worn by Hopi men who impersonate him during ceremonial performance. The difference is that the real Masao was not wearing a mask. His real face was so beaten and blood spattered that everyone simply assumed it had to be a mask. Now, let me present a thought here. It could be Christ. It could be the Messiah, the one that we call the Messiah, the Mashiach, Hamashiach, the Christos, right? The anointed one. It reminded when I was reading this, and again, I only went ahead a couple of paragraphs. It reminded me of um, Jim Caviezel in The Passion of the Christ. Like that's the image that came to mind for me. And in case, let me create an image in your mind here before we move forward. In case you haven't come across it yet, you out there in the internet, whoever may or may not be listening, well, I guess you'd have to be listening to hear it. Anyways, what if Christ, the Messiah, people always, atheists ask, well, what about the people in the jungles? Well, it's God. He's going to make sure that his savior, his Messiah, the people's Messiah, gets to everyone some way, somehow. What if he physically presents in a way that you, whatever you may be, whether you're brown-skinned, red-skinned, white-skinned or pink-skinned, black-skinned or purple-skinned, what if he present yellow-skinned? What if he presents to you? Oh my goodness, Sammy, I apologize. What if he presents to you in the way that you best understand and the way that you will best receive him? So just keep that in your mind as we move forward, because Christ throughout the Bible presents physically different to a lot of people. And several people don't recognize him at all at certain times. So keep that in your mind as we move forward. How does it happen that the Creator uses someone so ghoulish to be the guardian of the earth and all of its inhabitants? Why not a more attractive person? And how did Masao get that face? Was it like that when he was begotten by the Creator, or did something happen after he came to earth to take up his assigned responsibility? I think his face was battered when he fought a gargantuan battle with the forces of evil for control of the earth. In a sense, it ended in a draw since neither was banished. Yet in the end, it is Masao who will triumph. For he told the Hopi at Orabi that he is the first and the last, taking full control as the fifth cycle of the world begins. Now, the Hopi believe that we are at the end of the fourth cycle or the fourth age right now. In the meantime, Masao is the savior of the Hopi, just as Jesus Christ is the savior of the Christian world. You will recall that Jesus also said he was the first and the last. And in this titanic struggle against the devil and evil, he too was bloodied and battered on his way to the cross. Even the instructions and warnings the two of them gave to their disciples are similar in nature, and the prophecies of the end times are remarkably alike. Excuse me. All of this, even though they appeared on opposite sides of the globe and had no known contact with one another. What am I saying here? Is it that there are two saviors? Hold, please, let me take a sip. Not only that, but the Quran is also very similar throughout. It parallels the Bible. And again, it's almost a book for that culture. It's like the devil just broke up the one book that was for mankind and like tossed it aside so we would only get bits and pieces and scripts and have to put them all together. Because I was listening to a short testimony from a young Muslim man today, and he was talking about how he didn't find Christ in the Bible. He found Christ in between the pages of the Quran. He said, when you translate it, it says in there that he came of a virgin, that he made the lame walk, that he rose the dead, that he did all these things that Muhammad never did. He said, and we're even calling him the anointed one. And it even translates as the divine one. And in the Quran in their own book, he said, why then is no one else seeing this? He said, but I'm finding him, and that's where God is. He's sometimes like he's right there, but you don't notice him, right? Because he's in everything and every story and everyone and every live being. Or is it that Masao is really Jesus Christ who has come to the earth in a different guise? The Hopi do not say so, but some Native Americans tell us that legends handed down by their people teach that Jesus once walked the Americas and ministered to the natives. I'm not so foolish as to attempt an answer to either one of these questions. Having raised them, I feel like newspaper columnist Louis Gizzard, who, when asked, why don't newspapers tell the truth, he answered, hey, what the heck, only costs a quarter. If you want the truth, you got to pay $3.75. The survival kit will cost more than $3.75, but not enough more to get me to stick my neck out where the above questions are concerned. My aim is to provoke thought, not to end it. As a Christian, I cannot accept that there is any other Savior than Jesus Christ. Yet, at the same time, Masao fills this role for the Hopi traditionalists who are not Christians. Moreover, in learning about all that Masao does, you may have decided that he fills the role for a lot of other people too. Since no word of Jesus Christ would come to the Hopi during the first 1,000 years of their existence, it appears that the Creator provided Masao for some very special servants who needed him. Even when word of Christ did come to the Hopi, it was carried by Spanish individuals who were miserable representatives of the Savior they proclaimed. I would agree, that was all political. It would be pretty hard for any of us to accept the God of a people who had disdainfully overturned our lives and cultures, and after knocking us down because we wouldn't agree with them. This is what I'm talking about. Um, proselytizing, it's forced conversions. It's completely other than it's the opposite of proper evangelizing. The Michigander says, thank you for your time. Good stuff. Thank you for your time. Please don't thank me. It's the least I can do in these times is maybe just bring a little calmness sometimes or levity or just a different perspective. And time is something I have, so I give it. Okay, so where was it? Oh, right. We were talking about how they were trying to force conversion among the Hopi. So this would be a problem for them, obviously. But I know of Native American and indigenous people who have converted to Catholicism but kept their culture. And we have a hard time separating those two things. You know, the indigenous people had to be civilized, right? They had to wear the clothes we wore and cover up, and they had to do these things. But who was better behaved? Who had cleaner hearts? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. Okay. Remember also, oh wait, of course the Hopi wouldn't give up Masao. Of course the Hopi shouldn't give up Masao. If and when it is necessary, the true creator will do whatever he must to reconcile Christianity and Masao on the basis of right choices and right behavior. I would agree. And again, I think he gives you God gives you the Messiah that you will understand, like, at where you're at. God meets you where you're at in all cases. People just coming to Christianity, people before they convert. He knows who is gonna decide what. So, people plant seeds throughout your whole life. And I think our biggest, stumbling block is our culture, right? Because we don't wanna give up our own culture, and we shouldn't have to, but at the same time, that makes us blind to other people's basic rights to maintaining their culture too. Remember also that it is the Hopi traditionalists who are telling you their story. I am only the bearer who is passing it on to you. I believe in the reality of Jesus Christ, and I also believe in the reality of Masao. Both of them are too well attested to be dismissed from history stage. We Lutherans believe that the just live by faith. But where the validity of Christianity as a whole is concerned, people who are telling a lie do not, as hundreds of first century Christians did, let themselves and their children be burned at stakes for the enjoyment of drunken Roman audiences. Right, like if nothing else, they believed it for sure. And as for the validity of Masao, no one would have held on to his message as the Hopi traditionalists have if it were in any way false. Cult mentalities accepted people do get caught up in lies they have trouble getting out of. But when the game is up and they are faced with exposure, they will say, all right, I give up, and weasel out as best they can. When given the choice between renouncing their faith or being burned alive, the Christians in Rome told the Romans to go ahead and burn them. Wow. They were not about to deny what they had seen and heard. I find that especially convincing and honorable, admirable rather. I mean, that's just my opinion. What do I know? Well-educated Christians and traditionalist Hopi are not cult members. They do not brainwash others in an attempt to convert them. They don't, you know what, buildings. They don't place It's saying they don't terrorize. The fact that some, like the leaders who sponsored the Crusades or the priests who headed the Spanish Inquisition, claimed to be Christian did not make them such. True Christians and true Hopi do become involved in conflicts, but where it is at all possible, they solve these through peaceful efforts. I would agree there as well. Hold on. Let me make sure things are working. Yes, okay. How should we think of Masao? One of the best ways is to compare him with the ogre Kachina, who was, until recently, common and popular in the Hopi ceremonial cycle. Dan told me that the ogre had become another casualty of white education. Young Hopi are much too sophisticated now to believe in ogres, so they appear less and less in the villages, including Hotavilla. In a way, the situation is like that of our children who become quote unquote, old enough and mature enough to no longer believe in Santa Claus. Parents see this milestone as the end of a time when Christmas is a field of dreams come true. Something changes then. After that, the national holiday gets to be pedestrian. I would have to say, as someone who participated in that charade and did not want to, we had said we were not going to raise them that way. Um, I would say something changes because your children realize people lie. And not only that, but they realize their parents lied to them. And that's the first way that's really provable that there is this energy or this spirit against family and against the bond that families have with one another because it breaks the trust between a parent and a child. That's my opinion anyway, having participated in it. Um, I would stand my ground and I would be a stronger person like I am today, if I could do it over. So I just thought I would offer that little bit of unsolicited advice, but it is from a place of wisdom because I've been there and done that. So it says, parents see this milestone as the end of a time when Christmas is a field of dreams come true. Something changes then. After that, the national holiday gets to be pedestrian. Shopping for toys can be a pain in the neck, but watching the children when they open the packages and recording it on film is something else entirely. Those who complain about the secularization of Christmas ought to think about this and should realize that we can do this and keep Christ in Christmas very nicely too. Yeah, we once did. We once were a little better at not go big or go home. Not everything was quite so excessive. What is lost for the Hopis is that the ogres filled an important position in the educational scheme, and where children are concerned, there is nothing in Hopi lore to replace it. Today, this loss is attended by a general loss in respect for parents and elders at Hopi land and a loss in respect for almost everything else of value. As in the case with so many families in the outside world, the Hopi families who have chosen to imitate the whites, quote unquote, have also fallen apart. One of the prophecies says that the raising of women's skirts above the knees will lead to the devaluation of a woman's body and of many other things, unquote. That's actually, there's a Catholic prophecy that agrees with that. It was from one of the apparitions of Mother Mary. That was like one of her specific things that she passed along was the length of women's skirts, and back then it was the hippie era. So, oh gosh, like if I was losing patience back then, I could only imagine. So, do you see how these prophecies and these um different polarizations of different groups and the secular and the unsecular and the natural. Do you see how across all these different threads that they share a lot of the same prophecies, culture by culture, religion by religion? That is the Spirit of God, speaking to trying to warn us, like, hey, you need to change this. You need to stop doing, whatever it is we're doing at that point. There isn't much of anything that is on a pedestal anymore, and the heroes and goals that we do put there are often as inconsequential and meaningless as could possibly be. What matters is that what the ogre accomplished for the family and the community. Like Masal, the ogre Kachinas were fearsome looking creatures. They were huge and frightening masks that had bulging eyes, gigantic snouts, mouths filled with sharp teeth, and whose crowns were topped with wild bunches of long hair. That sounds like the description of the locusts too in Revelation. That's wild. They carried weapons such as yucca whips, bows, and arrows, lances, clubs, and in modern times, even meat cleavers and handsaws. Wow. Their bodies were painted with garish colors, and they wore any kind of clothing that helped them seem bigger and more vicious. Animal blood was often poured on the weapons and the masks. You can see why ogre Kachina dolls were fun to carve and became popular with collectors. I have three of them. Yeah, I told you they are at the, consignment shop. I should show those pictures. Maybe I'll use one as the, thumbnail. Ogres hunched up their shoulders and uttered fierce sounds as they walked through the village, making themselves as menacing as they could. One of their most important duties was that of disciplining small children. In past times, this was a different situation than it is today, for by and large, children behaved quite well thanks to training and to the ever present threat of ogres. Sometimes, though, a few of the kids kicked over the traces, and word of this got around. Villages were so small that not much of anything could be hidden for long. The father would also say something about this when he was in his kiva with men who filled the ogre role. When the time neared for the ogres to appear, parents told such children that since their behavior left something to be desired, the ogres might just come and take them away. They would probably be disposed of in a fearful place like the bottom of a lonely canyon where they would never be heard from again. Yikes. Wow. They didn't hold back. I mean, that's how they discipline the kids. But a lot of, how many children have similar stories, about their area. Like your parents start the urban legend just to keep you on your toes and keep you behaving. Excuse me. Ogre Kachina. The threat was laid on as heavily as grout on adobe brick by both parents, who would shake their heads in sorrow and tell their child they wished something could be done to prevent the abduction. Quite likely, though, they would say nothing would help. Following this announcement, the tone of life around the house became noticeably subdued. When the child was sufficiently impressed, the mother would tell him in an inspired way, as though she just thought of it, that the ogres love sweet things like peaky and cookies. If some of these were available, she would tell him with a frown on her face, he might take them instead. Kind of how cookies are left out for Santa Claus. Can we make some? The child would ask expectantly, his jet black eyes pleading as he did so. Yes, his mother would reply, we can. That's how they got them to behave, huh? So the child would enthusiastically join his mother in preparing a basket full of sugary gifts. He might never again in his life work as hard as he did now. His sisters would be amazed. At the same time, he would, of course, be on his best behavior, and a smidgen of hope would edge its way into the picture. Now, hold for a moment. Now, again, we're adults, so it goes without saying, I hope that some of the lessons and some of the ways that things that they're trying to teach and convey and get across, there isn't going to be like a list. Like they're laying out here the things that are required for a properly for humanity to thrive, right? To be blessed abundantly. And that's through connection and bond. And, it's showing you that parents oftentimes will discipline their children, even though the children end up thinking the parent's mean or whatever. Um, the parent is doing whatever they're doing because they love the child. And I feel like a lot of people miss out on this with the Spirit of God if they're not a parent themselves. It's very hard to put themselves in that position. Okay. So then one dark and gloomy night, while the family was gathered together and by chance discussing what might happen, they would hear loud banging followed by moaning sounds that came from outside their house. They're here, their parents would whisper frantically to the child, go and hide someplace. In less than an instant, as if by magic, the child disappeared. At once there would come a horrendous pounding on the door, followed by harsh voices announcing they were ogres who demanded to be let in. Ignoring the child's pleas that they do not do so, the parents would slowly open the door, whereupon the ogres would push them roughly aside and come storming into the living room. Knowing who the child was, they would call out his name and insist in bellowing tones that he come immediately to them. All the while they did this, their bulging eyes searched the room. Their great mouths clamped open and closed, and they made menacing gestures with their weapons. Where is he? They would roar. It was all the boy could do to keep from dying on the spot, and it was all the parents could do not to laugh and give everything away. When at last the wide-eyed and trembling child crept slowly from his hiding place, the ogres grandly announced to one and all that they had heard he was not behaving as he should, and that they had come to take him away. Wow. Then they lunged at him and attempted to grab him. In tears by now, the child would run to his parents, who pretended they were filled with anguish over the idea of losing their precious child. Oh, that's funny. And again, only a parent would understand. When they felt the child had suffered enough, the parents would tell the ogres that their son had been bad, but not so bad he didn't deserve another chance. See, the parents knew that the child was never in danger. Not at all. They were teaching them a lesson. That's sometimes how I feel about life. How God, has us placed here. And, from our perspective, it feels like, oh, the world is ending all the time. But he knows that in the end of this, we're going to be fine, and not just fine, but we will be better than how we started. So, anywho. Okay, in fact, they would say he had done a number of good things at home and in the fields, and while the boy vigorously nodded his head in agreement, they would tell the ogres what some of these things were. Why, they would triumphantly add he had even made some delicious desserts for the ogres, and hoped that if they came to his house, they would take those instead of him. By now, the boy was nodding like a cork on a fish line and in hearty agreement, getting ready to defend himself. For a few minutes, then, the ogres would grunt like hogs and act as tough any substitution was out of the question. Then they debated among themselves as to whether they could even do such a thing. Did the ancient laws permit it? I heard of something like this over at Mishongnovi, one would say, before he could finish his statement, and while the boy was hanging on every word, his voice would trail off. At this point, some of the ogres would raise their enormous snouts and, for the first time, smell the fragrant odors coming from the delicacies. Then they would sniff their way over to where they were and look at them. By now, they would show signs of weakening, mumbling at the same time. To take them might set a bad precedent for the rest of the villagers. Meanwhile, the boy cowered behind his mother with his arms clutched tightly around her waist. After what seemed like an eternity, the ogres would repeat their routine and finally agree to take the gifts. With these in hand, they offered a reluctant thanks to the boy and the parents and left the house, promising to return if they heard any rumors about the child's bad behavior. As we would expect, the moment they were gone and the door closed behind them, the grateful child hugged his parents and thanked them profusely for rescuing him. Then, while the parents acted as though they were amazed that their son had so narrowly escaped his abduction, the son ardent, ardently declared that he would show his appreciation by being a better child. The entire enactment of this centuries old drama cemented the parent child relationship and was always a beneficial educational experience. The next morning, he would seek out his best friend to tell him about the tortures of the damned he had been through the night before and warned the friend that he better make certain the ogres didn't come to see him. Interesting, no? As we might expect, by the time their rounds were completed, the kiva of the ogres was filled with delicious foods, and they had a grand and rollicking feast while they laughed about what each of them had experienced. Sadly, though, the ogres, like the snake dance and a number of other performances, are vanishing in some villages and already gone in others. We can chalk up another victory for white run schools and the United States government. Wow. Hopi kids are too smart to fall for this sort of thing today and too smart to behave as they once did also. In a broader and more encompassing sense, Masao fills the same role as the ogres for the adult traditionalist Hopi. His fearful presence keeps them ever mindful of punishment and death, but what he is truly seeking is their rescue. He delivers prophecies that are harbingers of death and destruction, but at the same time points to the instructions and warnings that will accomplish survival. Behind the true face that people think is a mask, there is beauty that is wondrous to behold. Masao is a deity who sacrifices himself and who cares tremendously about those who are placed in his charge. His entire way of life affirms this truth. Masao's character also tells us something important about the Creator himself. He often masks what he does in strange ways to test our willingness to hang in there until we learn the important lessons that are involved. He does not want us to make shallow commitments or to take for granted that our life with him is assured simply because we announce to one and all at a revival that we are, quote unquote, saved. We have seen that when the Hopi asked Masao if they could live with him at Arabi, his answer was to look askance. In an unspoken way, he was asking, why in the world would you want to do a thing like that? Can't you see that I have nothing here? My life is simple. All I have is my planting stick, my seeds, some water, and my cloak. If you are willing to live as I do and follow my instructions for the life plan I shall give you, you may live here with me and take care of the land. Then you shall have a long, happy, and peaceful life. The implication was that they ought to consider their decision carefully. Once it was made, it would not be an easy one to change. And as sure as anything, they were going to be tempted. What if it turned out that they were like so many folks whose lives were already centered in fun and games, and who were bored with such tiresome things as consequences and responsibilities? Some of those who have made this latter choice might respond by saying that Masao's concluding promise was a hollow one, that over the past century and during the Spanish occupation, Hopi life was anything but peaceful. But the Hopi can remember 650 other years that were, to them, near bliss. Whenever the traditionalists have been questioned about their promises or about their problems, they've been quick to point this out. While chapter 10 deals more comprehensively with warnings, let me give you here an example of the kinds we get from Masao. I hope it baffles you as much as it did me before I figured out how it works. Interesting. The teaching we read in the newsletters is that there are two great spirit Masaos, a poor and a wealthy. Confounding, isn't this, and seemingly at cross purposes? Yet it fits the picture of temptation as it is applied by evil forces. If they want to get to us in a sly manner, what better way than to follow the old adage of the wolf in sheep's clothing? Do you think this means that someone dresses up their own Masao to look and act like the real Masao? A costume figure might work. Unsuspecting people who don't look too closely anyway might think they are dealing with the good or poor Masao and then be lured into a situation they could not easily get themselves out of. The poor Masao, the newsletter continues, lives in simple and humble ways. He travels the good path and teaches good ways of life. He only has a planting stick and the seeds in making his living. He is the caretaker of the land. When we destroyed our last world by our own corruption, he permitted us to live on this land with him and use the land for all our needs and protected the land from harm. We made a commitment to obey his laws. We asked him to be our leader. He refused and said, "We have great ambitions in our hearts that not until we fulfilled the journey ahead to good or bad would he be our leader. For he is the first and shall be the last." Now, I guess it's time for the wealthy Masao. The wealthy Masao lives in carelessly evil ways. He is crafty and wicked. He is boastful that he knows how to use his influence to sway people to his ways. He can destroy and teaches no love, only hate. We must always be aware of his intentions. We believe that the meaning of this knowledge and wisdom in Bahana terms is that one signifies moral law and the other signifies material law. Right. Perhaps few will accept what we say. The sad fact in this period of time is that not only Hopi, but people throughout the world are forsaking the teaching of poor Masao and his laws for better things. Or they could be choosing doomsday and following the wealthy Masao. We are hopeful there may be one or two who still believe and are standing firm behind the poor Masao and the Great Spirit. Have you figured out who the two Masaos are yet? We know there is only one legitimate Masao. So what are the elders really saying? They're showing us that the two Masaos in this parable are the traditionalists on the one side and the tribal council and the Office of Cultural Preservation on the other. Both sides look like Hopi and both sides talk like Hopi, and both sides claim to be the group that truly represents Masao. Each of them wants to lure Hopi into its fold. Looking at the description given above, however, which would you say is the poor and true Masao, and which is the rich and false Masao? Which lives the humble and sacrificial life? Has anyone seen council or office people out in the fields with a digging stick and some seeds lately? Hold, please. So perhaps you're not an Indigenous American. Perhaps you don't have any Hopi experiences that match up to your own. But this right here, anyone can relate to. If you have faith or religion, or you've ever, been on the side of the underdog, you can kind of see what's going on here. You can get a feel. And as with the Bible, there's a legitimate, genuine, authentic article, and then there is the counterfeit, right? So it goes on to say, which of them is living in houses where all of the amenities of Bahana life are present? Which is it that handles all of the money that comes to the tribe? Which of them is in the kivas? Which is doing the ceremonies? And which is keeping the covenant? Sometimes those who play the wealthy Masao try to convince themselves that what they are doing is best for everyone, even though deep down inside they know it is not the truth. We see, however, that if their Masao wins, they at least have more company to keep them warm during their constant winters of discontent. The elders tell us that the two Masaos are both between us and within us. which poses still another mystery to be solved. What they mean is that we are in the middle or between them while the two of them seek to lure us into themselves. When we have made our choice, or once we have made our choice, we move into that one and are within him. After that, we are that one's follower and we are, with an exception, controlled by him. Related to the choice of Masao is another parable that speaks of one seed in which there are two seeds. This refers to the individual who has chosen which Masao he will follow, and yet retains the freedom of choice. In other words, he is never locked in. He can opt out whenever he wishes, although when he does this, in the case of the true Masao, getting back in is not easy. Every time a person steps off the balance beam, it costs him something, if nothing more than his carrying with him thereafter the awareness of his own vulnerability. It happened once, and he can never be certain it won't happen again. Like those who join AA, they need to keep to the mark with particular zeal for the rest of their lives. And you see, every culture has stories and tales and allegories that teach moral lessons. Now, whether they're true or historical or not is up for debate, but they definitely have morals behind them, not to mention proper grammar and speech as well. Clean, just more wholesome. Anyways, let me get a drink and we'll continue. Thank you. Before Bahana came, and even for a while afterward, the impersonators of Masao would appear as line dancers during the Kachina season. 20 or more of them dressed as Masao would form a long line and dance in the central plaza in remembrance of the great meeting at Orabi. Everyone who watched felt the impact when the dancers made the long moaning howl that was peculiar to them and shook their pattern of life rattles as they moved back and forth here at this here at this place the villagers called the center of the earth. We can be sure that the rain clouds above them were thick as grapes on a vine while this was going on. But over the years, the government made its inroads. Masao dancers were a prime target. It wasn't long before they all appeared less frequently, and finally, they did not appear at all. Interestingly enough, at the 1995 Bean Dance at Hotavilla, the masked Kachina dancers who danced at the public performance were led by a single, imposing Masao figure. Interesting, that year keeps coming up too. There is no question but that the traditionalists arranged this to make a powerful statement against what the Tribal Council Office of Cultural Preservation and progressives were trying to do to the village. No spectator who watched this could have failed to see and understand the message. Some of them must have trembled and held their breath. Council members must have clenched their fists and grumbled recriminations. They were coming to Hotavilla by then because they were gaining control and wanted everyone to know it. I wish I had been there to share the face-off. It was like a day in the Old West, except for the moment there were no guns. Those would appear on the council side at the renowned homegoing dance a few months later. And so you see, all of this culminates in this people, this ancient people who totally believe that they were given the land as this inheritance, being forced to stop their cultural practices that they believe hold the actual world in balance. They were being forced, coerced, intimidated, bullied, targeted, dare I say, because people wanted them to be more modern, right? And again, this is what happens when this polarization occurs and you try to force someone else to live in a way that they don't want to live. And that, history is going to keep repeating itself because we don't ever seem to learn that lesson. Outnumbered as the traditionalists were, everyone in the village knew that when a move like the promised utility installation was made against Masao's followers, the consequences could be grave. This is why, months after they were first placed there, the pipes still lay around the perimeter of the village. They were there at Bean Dance time in February, and they were there at homegoing in July. The two hearteds had found it difficult to summon up the courage to make their move. There was also the matter of guilty consciences to be considered. The decent members of the tribal council knew that putting in the utilities at Hotavilla village was a rotten thing to do, and they were concerned about having to live with that truth. Wow, so they're actually complaining about modern utilities. Imagine that. But they had promised to keep to the old ways and the old laws, aka probably natural law in a lot of ways. If through reading the Hotavilla book, the presence of the sacred object becomes known before or during the installation, it is going to become even harder to make their move, but sooner or later, the tribal council has to complete the job. They know they are being confronted by traditionalist power, and at this point in time, they cannot afford to lose face. If they don't move soon, their authority and control will be finished, and the other Hopi people will begin to stand up to them too. Now that they have a copy of the Hotavilla book in their hands, if the council and office have already gone ahead with the installation, there will be absolute consternation over their not having known about the buried village marker. Dan has tried to warn them, but as usual, they are not listening. So there is also a relic that is buried. And again, these modern people and people, the progressives, people that want to come in and do things without appreciating, the culture for what it is. And wow, it just, the arrogance amazes me. And he goes on to say, I know that authors are supposed to exercise self-control and place a damper on their feelings, but isn't what is going on up there at that tiny village in the midst of nowhere something impressive? What makes it even more dramatic is that while it sounds like a fairy tale, it is actually happening. I never imagined on that day in May when I entered Covenant Land that the Creator would be drawing me into something as important as this. Again, it's like people trying to chip away at other people's resolve and their culture. And even if they don't believe it, but that's what's sad about this is some of these people on this board, like they are Hopi too. So this is a schism in their own community, which we see everywhere now. Excuse me. Meanwhile, Masao carried on with his duties as guardian of the earth and shepherd of the traditionalists. In one of the newsletters, the elders described a moment when they prepared for an important meeting with agency officials, and the words they used give us a marvelous feeling of what it has been like to be a traditionalist involved in momentous events. The statement is beautiful and stirring. Would that all of your days begin with the same kinds of thoughts and emotions. So here he inserts this letter. As dawn appeared over the horizon in Hopi land, one would dimly notice movements of dark figures against the eastern sky. There was an air of extra awareness and feelings for those who were up at that hour. One could almost feel the movements of the Mother Earth getting ready to care for her children, and even the jogging feet of guardian Masao returning home after an all-night vigil over man. Dogs were barking, cocks and mockingbirds were sounding the arrival of dawn. Before long, Father Sun would take over the task he does every day. One by one, bowed, darkened figures would whisper and breathe their prayers upon the cornmeal that their hands held. Our Father Son, all the unseen living, help us this day with your supreme power. Echo your voices into the ears of men so that they may hear and understand our purpose here this day. Protect and guide us in the right way. May our body, mind, and spirit be wholesome this day. I humbly ask thee. Oh, that's so nice and so close to the Lord's Prayer. Interesting. Now people are going to say they're pagans. They're talking to the Father, Son. Well, yes, they are. They are doing that. But this doesn't mean that, not everybody that's different than us or different than you or different than me is, see, we're all wicked, but you know what I'm trying to say. Not everybody out there is Jeffrey Dahmer. America just seems to be going through it right now. We seem to be having a lot of personality issues with people out there. This is the kind of prayer Dan makes to the Creator and Son in the morning and to Masao each evening. I have italicized the lines regarding Mother Earth and Masao so that you would not fail to notice them. For clarification, you need to know that every morning Mother Earth gets ready to care for us, and that every night Masao also flies 4 times around the earth, to see for himself what is going on there. He assumes the form of a fireball, and what we often mistake for a falling star or comet is really Masao going by. Masao also spends part of his time jogging around Hopi Land to see that, despite the problems there, all is as well as can be expected. Oh, what? As he jogs, he carries a lighted torch both to illuminate his way and so that Hopi, who might accidentally come upon him, will know to give him a clear berth. He has work to do and does not want to be slowed down. He tours all of the villages of Hopi land, and reports from Hopi who have sighted him are common. I asked Susie if she ever had seen him while he was making his rounds, and she said that she had seen him trotting across their property several times. There's something else we need to know about Masao and his relationship to the entire globe. Reference is made in the prophecies to a gourd of ashes that will fall upon the earth and cause great devastation. Hopi leaders have interpreted this gourd as the atomic bomb and relate it to nuclear bombs that will be used during a third world war, the description of which is similar to those of Armageddon predicted by other prophets. Most Hopi do not know about this other little gourd that Masao carries, but Dan Evahama told me about it. It too is filled with ashes, but they are miracle ashes that do not cause devastation. They end it. The prophecy is that when, during the Great Purification, the Hopi are about to be ravaged to the point of extinction, Masao will pour his ashes upon them and the rest of Hopi land, and all of the fighting in the world will stop. Then a new harmony will come upon mankind. The fourth cycle will close, and the fifth cycle will begin. How does anyone make a deity of death out of Masao? Let's consider some other examples of his true nature. The elders say, in our language, the name Hopi has held the same meaning from the beginning. It names those who live by the plan laid out by the spirit Masao and today hold the land in trust for him. Although our bloodline is very important, the word refers to our whole way of life, as well as to the foundation of the authority of our traditional leaders and our claim over the land. They make reference to the way it used to be at Hopi Land during the harvest season. Let us step back to our past before our way of life was disturbed. Our life was of happiness, our activities, entertainments, and ceremonial patterns were complete. Let's take a glimpse of one of the ancient ones. Long ago, when the first Hopi met Masao, they asked for his permission to live with him in Old Arabi, so Masao would watch activities from his housetop. Perhaps for some reason he thought of the idea of getting the people together to make them happy during the harvest season. He gathered the leaders and explained what he had in mind. He made a request that was announced from the housetop that during 4 days the people would harvest for him. Women would prepare the meals, while girls, boys, and men together would harvest his cornfields. On the fourth day, they gathered and went below the mesa. There they formed two groups at 1/4 of a mile from each side of the field. At a signal, they ran towards the field while shouting and whooping. Boys and girls worked side by side, shy at first until they began to laugh and talk. They had great fun and took advantage of this occasion, for at that time girls were respected, so that one could not talk to a girl just anywhere or at any time. Man, I like that. Suddenly, Marcel would pop out of the compound and start chasing the men around. Everybody would be laughing, hollering, and at the same time fearful of him, for his face looked ugly, horrible, and bloody with the look of death. This ended the harvesting, and they returned home. After the meal, Masao entered the plaza, where men were dressed in different costumes to tease and challenge him. Finally, he would knock out one of his victims with his weapon, a drumstick. He acted like a clown and would strip his victim, who pretended to be dead. He would then dress up himself with that costume in the opposite manner of him whom he stripped. Just like that, Masao would chase the men around, and everyone would laugh and have a good time. It would end with them killing him with a hot torch to the mouth. Then he was carried to the outskirts of the village, where he was dumped. But he came alive when they hollered and shouted. Those were days when men communicated openly and verbally with spirit beings, animals, birds, and men could talk and understand each other. At that time, there were no quote unquote animals of burden. Then Masao was part of the ceremonial cycle until he hid himself from men. Later, he was impersonated. Finally, not long ago, this was discontinued. Is it possible that this has meaning the Great Spirit himself has drawn up? You see by this intriguing story that in the beginning, the real Masao participated in the harvest, which always has been the most joyous of the four seasons for those who have continued to farm at Hopi land. In this account, we are introduced to a Masao who is fun loving and who has a fondness for performing. He wants to share this side of his nature with the people, and he does not mind being made fun of. This brings him closer to his people. As was made clear at the first meeting at Arabi, he is therefore a very warm and personal deity, not imperious, remote, and reeking of death. Being able to humble him for even a moment was something the Hopi relished, and it gave them a healthy perspective regarding their guardian. Masao is awesome in appearance, but has the proverbial heart of gold. So too did the menacing ogres who carried out their duties in an effort to bring understanding to children that would assure them the very best kind of life. This is consistent with the nature of the instructions. One of their first lessons is that children must be taught to have respect for others, and especially for their elders. See, so he is telling us what it takes to have an abundant life and how to survive these times. Because for having morals and values and ethics right now and compassion in your heart, most important of all, is very rare. But that's what God will be looking for right now. Are those diamonds in the rough, right? It's about your heart. What is your heart capable of in this time especially? What are you made of, and what is your heart still compassionate for other people, right? And other beings and other life? Hold, please. So, this is consistent with the nature of the instructions. One of their first lessons is that children must be taught to have respect for others and especially their elders. At the same time, the adults, by what they are taught to do, must show their respect for one another and for the Creator and His helper spirits. So that means that the adults need to get along with each other, not be argumentative, and they need to show that same respect for the Creator and those who help him, which some would call angels. They're calling them here helper spirits. So let's continue. The quote unquote unseen living. Can you imagine what a chore it was for the ogre impersonators to wear their heavy masks and costumes and to behave as they had to? But they did it because it was a task that brought lasting and important results. We often see the nature of the deities themselves as they are reflected by the people they choose to represent them. By looking at the servants, we can see what their creator and his helpers are really like. Several of the traditionalists I mention often in my books have made prominent contributions in this regard during the last century. Yukiyama stands at the head of the line. This gritty little man, who was given special attention in the Hotevella book, assumed the leadership of the Hopi at Orabi, who refused to give in to the United States government. He did whatever was necessary to hold to his vow during the division of Orabi, and in 1906 led his followers away from the village and to Hotevella Springs, where the new village was founded. So firm was he in his convictions that he endured 8 imprisonments and endless harassing during his term as Kikmongwe of Hotevilla. He set a precedent for all the traditionalist leaders to follow and is remembered by traditionalists as one of the greatest Hopi ever. He is the closest thing to a hero that the traditionalists have. Dan Kay was one of the most charismatic leaders to serve as Kikimongwe of Hotevella village. A son of Yukiyuma, he inherited his father's determination and wisdom. An eloquent orator and teacher, he remained until his death in 1972 one of the most sought after guides to the traditionalist life way. One of his final acts was to dictate an abbreviated memoir that included some details of his life and also some of the most important of the Hopi prophecies. That memoir is included in its entirety in the Hotevella book and stands as one of the most valuable documents to come out of the traditionalist era at the Shrine of the Covenant. David Monangai served as the last traditionalist Kikamongwe of Hotevella village. He was an extremely intelligent man who was as familiar with the outside world as he was with Hopi land himself. He was a kind man, but also firm. He was able to communicate effectively with Bahanas who were open to traditionalist needs and gave them express guidance as to how they could help in the most effective ways. Sounds like he was diplomatic. He also foresaw the dire consequences that would come from the operation of the Peabody mine and did his best to alert everyone regarding the dangers. Once the tribal council, the Office of Cultural Preservation were installed, he fought them at every turn. And you see, this is, again, this is relevant to what we're going through today. Our land, whether people realize it or not, is being strip mined. They are taking all of the resources that they can at this point. Not to mention, our land is being set aside for data centers for machines so that people can make TikTok videos and ask Grok questions all day long. Because as we all know at this point, or I hope we're responsible to understand that if you ask AI to send one 100-word email, it uses hundreds and thousands of liters of water. People need that water. People need that water. But because the people with the most money want to live with conveniences, they don't care what everybody else wants or how anyone else wants to live. Really think about that. The next time you're enjoying your modern conveniences, some people choose to live without them. And sometimes I wonder, how content and satisfied are the Amish communities? I mean, sure, we've seen some of them allegedly on TV, but that doesn't represent all of them. I mean, think about that. Really think about it. They live amongst everybody. They are in the world, but not of it, as Christ followers are told. They're doing it. It amazes me sometimes. And I'm not saying that money in itself is bad all the time or that material things are all bad either. But America has gotten to the point where, we are all of us excessive. And we don't even realize it most of the time. Like it takes really seeing how somebody else lives or some type of sadly, some type of trauma because we've all been so desensitized our whole lives. So this guy is foreseeing, like he already knows what's gonna happen. Titus Lamson, now all he's doing here is listing the main characters of the book and where some of this information comes from. Titus Lamson and Dan Evaham were lifelong friends who shared their loyalty to the creator and Masao. He went to join the Kachinas in December of 95 at the age of 94. So that's when he died. Titus was an outstanding keeper of the covenant and a strong defender of individual Hopi rights. I wonder how gas and oil come to play in the original covenant. Because I just like I don't judge anyone else that drives and I get rides all the time to go places, but I walk and I ride my bike on a daily basis. So I just like, is it okay to use for them some of the time ever? Because I know like way back it used to be, I mean, I'm allegedly a Caucasian person. I really don't know my roots, but I can see that it's kind of like the blood of the earth. So I just wonder about that. Anyways, uh so it says Titus is gone. The tribal council is extracting a price from those Bahana whom Titus permitted to live on his land and farm it. There'll be more on that on chapter 11. Caroline T. is Dan Avahama's sister, a happy and wise lady. She was the first child born at Hotevilla after the split at Orabi. Therefore, she's probably about 90. She's been a staunch and spunky traditionalist for the whole of her life. Caroline has often led those who have resisted what the tribal council has attempted to do. In particular, she was in the forefront of those who, during at least 3 earlier attempts, kept the utility pipes from being laid in Hotevella village. You see, like they really don't want those utilities on there. And you got to ask yourself, why? Is that part of the original covenant? Because again, if so, then the Amish people got that part right. I just, I don't know. Like, how do you start to live that way when you lived your whole life already on the system? Like, how do you segue into that? Okay, so I don't really want to, we don't need to know everything about all these people, okay? Our own wealthy Masao comes in the guise of materialism to tempt us and uses the same approaches that he does with the Hopi. Therefore, all of the warnings given to the Hopi at Arabian AD 1100 are lessons we need to listen carefully to. When we add them to the warnings the world itself is giving us, we can see that our situation is not a good one. We need to know what the secret is, and we need to follow its instructions and warnings. So here we go. The secret. Prophecies past and present. This is chapter 6. Everything having to do with the secret begins with the prophecies. Up to this point in time, no more than half a dozen of the prophecies have been revealed. All of them, totaling about 100, are given in this chapter and in chapter 7. The Hopi traditionalists, what time is it? I don't know how far we are into the video. I should timestamp it. About an hour in. Okay, I'll remember that. Now what are you doing? Well, go away. All right. The Hopi traditionalists do not need to convince us that their prophecies are valuable and extraordinary. They differ from other prophecies in that the Creator has designed them to perform several unique functions. So please read what I tell you about their unique qualities before you read the prophecies themselves. I describe how the prophecies work and I tell you how to interpret them properly. Hush up. Once you understand these things, there will be no limit to what the Hopi prophecies can do for you. The source of the Hopi prophecies. I assume you noted my assertion that the Creator has designed them and wondered why I said it. It is because any consideration of Hopi prophecies begins with the recognition that their author is the Creator himself. This is what the Hopi have resolutely claimed for nearly 1,000 years. And when we consider Hopi prophecies, we too must think of them as coming from the Creator. The information the Hopi were given at Arabi was routed through his assistant Masao, but it did not originate with him. Where the prophecies are concerned, he is a bearer and nothing more, in the same way the Hopi are not producers of the information. They are channels through whom the Creator and Masao speak to us. Since we receive the prophecies from the Hopi, we call them the Hopi prophecies. This is really a misnomer, just as it is misleading to call what you are reading the Hopi Survival Kit. I use the word Hopi on the book jacket for simplification and for familiarity's sake. We know who the Hopi are and we can identify with them. We must, however, be clear in our understandings. It is imperative to recognize that the Creator himself is the author and source. They are what he sees, what he plans, and as such are infinitely superior to any predictions that have a human origin. Knowing where the Hopi prophecies originate, we can expect every one of them to be lucidly presented and accurately fulfilled. They will not be phrased in some strange language that needs decoding, and most will not need to be explained. These insights regarding the source should give everyone special confidence in the Hopi prophecies. Recognizing their source is an admission that we acknowledge his concern for us and accept that he cares enough to warn us and provide us with the means of defending ourselves. Despite the fact that our amazing story opens with an adventure into the unknown underworld, Hopi prophecy has a clearly established historic origin. Its realities cannot be contested. It was etched in stone at Arabi and has been reviewed and proclaimed by the Hopi loyalists every year for nearly 1,000 years. If all of this is not true, the traditionalists of each succeeding generation will have gained nothing by basing their lives on it and expounding it. Where Hopi where Hopi understandings are concerned, the exceptions to the principal source just mentioned are where Masao and other spirit beings continue to commune with the Hopi when they pray, oh, when they pray individually or as a group in a kiva ceremony. When the Hopi do their rituals, these spirit beings send power and strength and wisdom into the celebrants. The performers receive it first and then pass it on to villagers and friends who, in heart and soul and mind, are identifying with them. This is power for understanding, power for the growth of crops, and power for the deepening of the love relationship that bonds creature with creator. The process is part of a melding that has been established through the covenant and maintained through tribal initiations, the making of shrines, and the living out of the entire pattern of life. There is also individual or group. In countless places throughout the Southwest, they have built their sacred shrines and sunk their roots into Mother Earth. The shrines are not allowed, but through them, she sends up to the Hopi her personal power. At these places, the fibers of the Hopi heart and soul interweave with hers to establish a bountiful union. It is a fusion that is kept alive by rituals performed at them by Hopi. Every past and present day village has numerous shrines in and around it. These are sacred places that are not to be disturbed by outsiders. When a Hopi is at one of them and performing a ritual or saying a prayer, he or she is able to commune with Mother Earth in ways that others cannot. Knowledge is acquired about creation that the rest of us can only envy. Since they have obtained this valuable information, it is especially wonderful that the traditionalists are willing to part with it, particularly in this critical moment of environmental need and stupendous natural disasters. Of course, not every Hopi can claim this blessing. Not all of them are linked with the Mother Earth. On the fence, Hopis still use the shrines, progressives do not, but many of those who seek to walk simultaneously in both the red and white worlds are as deaf to her as those of us in the outside world who have no shrines and who have established no useful connection with her. It's very deep and it's quite beautiful the way that they they take their covenant with the Mother Earth and with Masal, they take the covenant very seriously that they have made with Creator, and they believe that their prophecies, these ones are prophecies that will come true, right? As to where our prophets warn about something that could happen, these are things they're saying are definitely going to happen, whether you repent or not, but they might not happen to you if you are walking this out the right way. So, beyond the things already mentioned, the traditionalists Hopi have a conditioned sensitivity that comes from following the annual cycle of rituals and duties. These keep them attuned to the Creator and the highest spirits and hold them in a state of readiness to meet any problems that arise. How wonderful it is then that the traditionalist Hopi believe the time has come to share this gift with us so that we can enjoy the same advantages. We should be eternally grateful and listen carefully to them as they reveal the marvelous secrets they have learned about the Creator and survival. Moreover, this gift is freely given. It does not and will not cost us a cent to take full advantage of it. The traditionalists want nothing in return except perhaps our support. We should remember, too, that we are experiencing here is a rare treat. It is the first complete rendering of the Hopi prophecies ever made to the outside world. Okay, let's keep going here. And when he does put on a... Since the Hopi prophecies sound modern for information received so long ago, we need to know why they do. During specified Kiva ceremonies, it has been the Hopi custom to repeat annually in the Hopi language all of the information pertaining to the life pattern. I say has been because it is doubtful that anyone will be equipped to do this after the elders are gone. Until now, the prophecies and instructions were memorized so that they could be passed on word for word in the exact form they were first received. But needs have changed and the language has been adapted to our time and requirements. This is why the revealed information seems modern today. What we read in the newsletters has been brought up to date for present day Hopi and ourselves. Seeing a lot of people ridicule the Bible for that, but you wouldn't be able to understand it otherwise, right? Contemporizing was a difficult task for the writers of the newsletter, but they knew that if the legacy was to be passed on, it could not be avoided. Thanks to their education in white controlled schools, far too many Hopi are no longer able to read, write, or speak the Hopi language. Oh my God, what a tragedy. They can only understand Hopi when it has been translated into modern English. The elders commonly claim that the young people can no longer comprehend the commands of the fathers who lead the ceremonial dances and that they do not understand the words of the ancient songs. Accordingly, many dancers follow the routine but lack the profound understanding that traditionalist elders have, right? Like they can copy the dance, but they don't know the reason behind every movement. Because a lot of times, like we look at dance today and we don't think of it as what it started as, but it was rituals and it was things that people did like at solstice and for crops and for rain, like all these different ways to just gain God's favor and attention, basically. But every movement there was, that was choreographed, there was a purpose to it and there was a reason for it. Much like yoga today, people don't really know why they're doing the movements that they're doing, or at least not the original reasons. Okay, Hopi prophecies point beyond themselves. An incident at Dan's home will introduce you to Hopi attitudes regarding the prophecies and how they work. While we were sitting on the couch in his living room, I opened my notebook and showed him how I was removing the prophecies from the newsletters and putting them in order. When I explained that I was doing this so that they could be studied as a separate unit, he smiled and shook his head in amazement. Bahana's ways, he said, pitying us for having to go to such lengths. But he turned a few of the pages, grunted, and then nodded his head in approval. I knew what was running through his mind. He had expected me to do this because it would be the only way we could reach Vahanas. Meaning, like, if you were reading the Bible, Vahana basically means Gentile, I think. When we were out in the yard later on and sitting in the shade of the ramada at the picnic table, he picked up an ear of corn that was lying there. It was golden yellow sweet corn, the kind Hopi eat when they celebrate the harvest at the great homegoing dance. A brief homegoing. And we have what do we call it at high school now? Homecoming. And this at the end of harvest they call homegoing. That's interesting. Talk about that inversion again. A brief rain that morning had brightened its color and made it shine. Rain is always a good sign. He turned it back and forth and admired it as we do a precious gift. Then he bent over and cradled it in his arm as a mother does a child. He stroked its kernels and sang a song to it. An ear of corn, okay? It was a short melody whose words were those of gratitude to Mother Earth and the Creator. As he straightened up, he looked toward his cornfields across the road. His eyes softened, and for a moment he was lost in memories. Decades of farming had blended him in an amazing way with those fields. Compared to the sweeping cornfields of Minnesota, they didn't look like much to me. But for centuries, they had been life itself for his family, and his feelings toward them were powerful. I understand then why he did not like being away from the fields for very long. He turned to me and made a dispensing motion with his hand, saying as he did so, prophecies come, prophecies go, but we live on. That is what happens to those who follow the road plan and the pattern of life. What he meant was that the prophecies passed on by Masao do not dominate life, and they are not an end in themselves. They are a direction arrow and a catalyst. They point to and push us towards something that is beyond them, yet which works in tandem with them. This something is a superb way to fortify ourselves against the prophecies when fulfillment is threatened and when they are actually fulfilled. Therefore, even the most terrible of the prophecies has a good side to them. It is one of those, oh wait, it is one that is amazing in that Hopi, what are you doing? Turn the page. Prophecies can be self-defeating. They tell us what will take place and immediately thereafter lead us to the instructions and warnings that enable us to either lessen their impact or keep them from happening, at least from happening as soon as they otherwise would. Prophecies that are directly related to the Hopi help us as well. As I have said, there are about 100 Hopi prophecies. Since some prophecies contain several within their descriptions, the exact number is difficult to determine. As we study them, it is intriguing to discover that while most have to do with the Hopi themselves, they are also useful to us. This is not difficult to understand. The Hopi and we share the same creator, and as human beings, we have a lot in common. The traditionalist Hopi know that, and it is unfortunate that so many outsiders, Christians in particular, fail to realize it. Masao implants a special kind of assurance within those who respond to his call to serve. As prophecies are fulfilled in Hopi land, and as the traditionalists carry out their assigned responsibilities, the guardian of the earth helps them grow in strength, self esteem, and conviction. Then the Hopi are able to speak from personal experience and with confidence. They know they are dispensing firsthand knowledge and they know what they are talking about. Since many of the prophecies deal with the personal aspects of individual lives, they enable the Hopi to see the Creator's concern for them as individuals, as a group, and in terms of their relationship to the entire world. Above all, the prophecies lift the Hopi up and let them sit at the right hand of the Creator. From this extraordinary vantage point, the Hopi are able to see what is going on around them, what is coming, and what they must prepare for. Sounds like a lot of us these last several years. As we view the prophecies that are personally related to the Hopi, we learn to identify with the Hopi and we discover what happens to them happens to us. We learn what the Creator's true nature is and are no longer able to think of it in terms of what we would like it to be. Most of us prefer the quote unquote good Creator who's always understanding and permissive and who treats us as innocent victims of circumstances that are always beyond our control. We want a Creator who protects us from evil and who thinks we merit a long and untroubled life. When life doesn't work out that way, we are mystified. We simply don't understand it. But at the same time, we insist upon freedom and free choice. In short, we want to be indulged. Whenever something untoward happens, we ask why me or why them. Our personal contributions to the situation are conveniently overlooked. As long as we are pretty good on a relative scale, we think the right kind of Creator ought to appreciate that and take good care of us. That's true. Fortunately, and in certain circumstances, he does take better care of us than we can rightfully expect. In this regard, it is helpful to observe how prophetic fulfillments affect the Hopi, why they do, and what their answer to them is. Then, when our own pattern of thinking finally gets straightened out, our chances of survival will be greatly enhanced. We will have obtained a clearer picture of human nature and of what kinds of creatures the Creator has to deal with. Then, as we watch the fulfillment of a succession of prophecies in the lives of the Hopi, we will no longer doubt that future prophecies will also come to pass. Centering upon prophetic fulfillment in the lives of the Hopi is much less complex than having to view it in terms of fulfillment throughout the entire world. Prophetic hope. And that's kind of like what I've talked about in my own testimony of seeing how things that happened in my family then suddenly like ended up happening on a public scale. There was just a pattern to it. And that's how you could tell it was some other force, like a darkness. Michigander says, Creator provides if the dude abides. So true. I like that. Creator provides if the dude abides. I like that. I might steal that if that's okay. We usually think of prophecy as something that has to do with disasters that will happen in the future, either to a person, a group, or a place. In this view, there are no nice prophecies. Most are so foreboding that they only incite fear and are so derisively called doomsday prophecies. A book that is filled with them can leave us gasping for breath. Since we have enough bad news and don't need more, we usually turn our backs to prophecies and hope they will go away. So true as human beings, we do that. In terms of how they work, the Hopi prophecies are not, however, doomsday prophecies, and only a fraction of them have to do with world shaking events. Some point to useful commodities that will be invented, and others have to do with great changes that will take place in society. When it comes to deciphering them, the prophecies of outside world prophets can, by comparison, be extremely frustrating. We are seldom told why a certain prophecy is going to be fulfilled. Figuring this out is something we must do for ourselves. We must deal with the fact that while some prophecies come to pass, others do not. We are left with the dilemma of not knowing what, if anything, we should do about any of them. At the same time, we cannot deny that the prophecies of the Bible have proven their accuracy, and we know that a few prophets, like the well known Nostradamus, have compiled impressive track records. His interpreters admit that of his more than 1,000 prophecies, 800 continue to defy translations that are acceptable to everyone. He appears also to have made a few inaccurate predictions. Yet he made incredibly accurate predictions concerning some of the most important individuals and events in history, where a few of his predictions about the future are close to duplicating those of the Hopi. I make note of them in the material ahead. Even the details he gives of how things will happen inspire awe. Now and then, Nostradamus does reveal how history will shape itself to guarantee the fulfillment of certain prophecies. John Hogue, one of Nostradamus' foremost interpreters, oh yeah, that guy that was always on the History Channel, claims that the reason the prophet made his prediction known was to give people the opportunity to do something to prevent them from happening. And that is true. That was the whole purpose for all of the Old Testament. Well, one of their purposes. As I said earlier, God is nothing if not efficient. Everything always fulfills a couple of roles, so there is no waste. But Jonah, and I always use Jonah as an example, I know, but Jonah's prophecies didn't come to pass because they changed their behavior, and so they avoided disaster. So this, these are examples as to why it is good to heed certain things, and if you can change, by all means, do it. We have considered some of the ways in which the Hopi prophecies differ from those of Nostradamus and other prophets, but there are more. Hopi prophecies substantiate themselves in that every one of them that should have been fulfilled by now has been, indicating that the rest of them will be. Some are in the process of being fulfilled at this very moment. The track record to date is perfect. These important prophecies tell us in advance what we should anticipate and prepare for, teaching us caution and awareness. They tell us why things will happen, thus helping us understand ourselves, the nature of the world, and the nature of our Creator. And since they point beyond themselves to the instructions and warnings, we are given active ways to get ready for them and to counteract the damage. Note the word active. We are not left to sit, to wonder, or to live in fear. We can get to work immediately on specific solutions. More importantly, we are trained to be constantly doing as an automatic process of life everything that is necessary to keep us alert and ready. Therefore, we are able to live in abiding hope. Above all, there is a splendid gentleness in what we are called upon to do, a gentleness that clothes us in an attitude that affects everything we think, say, and achieve. Our life takes on a rhythm that is synchronized with the universe. We learn to touch, to care, to relate, and to find the ultimate joy in life, which is a state of oneness with the Creator and everything that He has created. Prophetic ifs. We are seeing that the Hopi prophecies separate and distinguish themselves from others. Taken together, the ways tell us that because of our sinful natures, the Creator has no option but to deal harshly with us. Yet at the same time, He has provided us with a way to redeem ourselves and find an escape from any dilemma. Even now, we have not exhausted the ways in which the Hopi prophecies work. There are more. When Masao gives his prophecies, instructions, and warnings to the Hopi at Arabi, they were often conditioned by ifs and maybes. This is why the elders often preface or punctuate their statements with conditioners such as, if we are fortunate, this will happen, or if we are not fortunate, this will happen. This neither this is neither indecision nor an admission of not knowing the answers. It is a recognition of how Hopi prophecy works, and it says that the final outcome does not rest in human hands. It rests in the hands of the Creator Himself. See, in Jonah, also, the story of Jonah also says that God had repented. I mean, God repents right in Genesis, and everybody kind of just misses it. He repented, he changed his mind of ever creating man in the first place, right? So if you change, this is why the prophecies are always if. Prophecies are warnings of possible outcomes. They're not warnings of definitive outcomes. God never does a thing without warning his children. He's just like we tell our kids, don't you do this or I'm going to ground you. Don't you do that or I'm going to take that phone away. And, if we don't listen to our Father, then this is what could possibly happen. Hopi prophecy function as a stage play. In Hopi prophecy, life functions as a global play in which all of us are the actors. That's interesting. There are possible things that can happen in each act, but we ourselves determine which of these it will be by what we choose to do. And that's the whole thing with prophecy too. um you've got free will, right? And God left a lot of room for the free will of humanity to where it's unknown to us. It's not unknown to him, but it's unknown to us, or else we would not walk this out the same and we would learn nothing if we knew it was just training ground or a simulated reality. And I don't mean electronic per se. I mean preschool almost, or like when we're done here we are graduating, right? The course that the act follows is determined by an initial choice and by subsequent choices. The traditionalists believe we are in the midst of the final act today, as the force cycle of the world closes down and we can shape and reshape its form if we make the right choices. In Hopi prophecy, there are no fated endings that are set in concrete, but the actual end of each act and the beginning of the next are left to the creator to decide. He also determines the conclusion of the final act of the play. Although he makes this decision in consultation with his principal assistant spirits, or in the Christian world, we would say angels, including Mother Earth. Therefore, the ultimate blessing or punishment to be rendered is one that, in their combined minds, will be appropriate in the light of human behavior. Since all of us who are alive are in the play at once, we face yet another question. Human choices are bound to be different. Does this mean the Creator will face the difficulty of having to choose which of us he will respond to? This is not really a problem. Our choice is a basic one. Whenever we are faced with an option, we must decide whom we will follow. Will it be the Creator, or will it be the two hearted forces of evil? Will it be the good Masao or the bad Masao? For instance, the Hopi have been told by the elderly elders that the time has come when they must end their vis- vacillating. They must choose now whether they will follow the Creator's way or the Bahana way of materialism. Once this basic choice is made by any of us, however, what follows may be involved and complex. Free choice remains, and the two seeds are still within us. Walking the narrow beam will never be easy, for temptations are constantly placed before us by the two hearteds. And if those don't work, pressure follows. And I can't help it. I can't help but recognize the similarities in their like parables and in the Christian Bible. Like I just can't help but to do that. And they're so similar. It's just wild. And what's more outlandish to me is that very few people recognize that. It's like everybody wants to be divisive and everybody wants to be like their own little group or whatever, which I get. Culture, let's keep that. But it's almost as if we're all arguing over nothing, as if we're most of us, not everyone, obviously, but it's as if a lot of us have much that and state that enough, especially times as they are, especially with the butterfly effect seeming to work on this channel and material we cover. If it's the material we cover and the words that I use, if I can spread anything, it would be that, that concern and that compassion and that, love for our fellow men and women and children. Okay. So it's saying here, in each instance, however, the punishment will always fit the crime. In a sense, we ourselves establish what it will be, and pretending ignorance about this will not change the situation. We will make our own bed, dig our own grave, puncture our own balloon. Prophetic timing. Now, let me check the time. I think, and I'm going to do these along with the regular videos as well. But this one is an hour and a half now, so I think it's a good place to stop and then actually get into the prophecies in the next video. I'm sorry if that bums anybody out, but this one's pretty long and I got to take my dogs out and get ready for bed. So I will read more from this book and the prophecies from it in a later video in the next few days or whatever. But if there are current events to touch on or whatever, I will still do a regular stream on that or just a, upload. But you guys have a blessed evening. Thank you for sitting here with me and listening to this book. And we will do the next segment maybe tomorrow night. Have a blessed night. Bye, guys.